You've heard it before. 9 hikers freeze to death in the snow, no explanation as to what happened to them, just a mystery. But what if I was to tell you, the thing that killed them on the mountain wasn't the cold, but a missile no one has admitted to firing. February 1959, a tent was found, sliced open from the inside. No one was found near it. The first 5 bodies to be found looked like they froze. The last 4 to be found looked like something else entirely. Over the years, theories have sprang up to try to explain what happened on the mountain, but none of them agree with each other. The first theory starts with the wind itself. That slope sits in a region known for katabatic winds, cold, dense air that drops off high ground and accelerates as it funnels through a pass. On a bad night, gusts pass 60 miles an hour, and they don't sound like ordinary weather. Some describe it closer to a jet engine. The theory holds that a wind event like that, hitting a tent in total darkness, could push 9 people straight into blind flight, cutting their way out through the canvas wall instead of the door, just to get away from a noise that sounded like the mountain itself collapsing on them. And it fits what they left behind when they ran. Coats, boots, food, supplies, every bit of it was still sitting inside that tent. Most of them went down the slope in socks. Some went barefoot, into the cold wind, like nobody thought there'd be time to grab anything. The theory accounts for the bodies found half-dressed further down that slope too. Freezing to death lies to the brain. It makes you think you're overheating. Someone's mind could have decided a blizzard was a heat wave and the clothes come off. The wind theory accounts for the group running in terror, half-dressed, into weather that should have killed them. One of the things it doesn't explain is what was found on the hikers' clothes. The second theory is the one that put this case back in the headlines. A group of independent researchers proposed that a Soviet R-12 missile, a real weapon tested in that exact region during that exact period, launched, failed, and released a cloud of nitric acid that drifted directly over the campsite. Nitric acid is what rockets of that era used as fuel oxidizer. It's corrosive, and breathing even a diluted cloud of it can cause confusion, disorientation, and burning pain, which would explain why 9 trained hikers might do something that looks completely irrational. There's real weight behind this theory. Search parties that same night independently reported a fireball crossing the sky. Some of the hikers' clothing tested positive for radiation, and decades later, the lead investigator on the original case admitted on record that he'd been ordered to bury certain findings before the file was ever closed. A government that admits to hiding part of its own file isn't a hard one to suspect of hiding the rest of it. And we've got 2 theories on the table. 2 very different explanations for the same torn canvas. Neither one touches the bodies found months later, once the snow melted. With crushed ribs, a fractured skull. Injuries the first 5 didn't have. A cover-up could explain why people might not trust the official story. It doesn't explain what searchers actually found when they got to that tent. Kholat Syakhl translates to Dead Mountain in the language of the Mansi people, who have called parts of it sacred in their culture for generations, long before any maps routed hikers through it. The theory suggests the group either trespassed on land they weren't meant to be on, or encountered something tied to that older history, something the official Soviet investigation had no interest in taking seriously. When the first 5 hikers were found, they were close to a tree line, near the remains of a small fire that had gone out. One of them had a small crack in his skull. This was not enough to have killed him on its own. And in the weeks of searching around that tent, every set of tracks found belonged to one of the 9 hikers. Nothing else had came or went. Whatever had done it didn't need a weapon, and it didn't need to walk up to the tent. The last 4 hikers weren't found till months later, in May, once the snow finally melted enough to expose a ravine further down the slope. The bodies found in that ravine had crushed ribs, fractured skulls, and severe post-mortem damage to them. The 4th theory holds that once the group reached the tree line, They dug a den into the snow above a running stream for shelter, and that the roof of it eventually gave out under its own weight, crushing whoever was underneath. The running water underneath is what most directly explains the missing eyes and tongue. 3 months of exposure in moving water with small scavenging animals will do that kind of damage after death. 4 theories, 4 different explanations. But new evidence from surveys and forensic testing put real numbers on the campsite slope. Angles, the timing of the snow buildup, injury patterns on the bodies recovered. Everything has something concrete to measure against. We'll start with the one thing nobody argues about: the ground they were actually camped on. The original surveys of the campsite measured the slope at roughly 20 degrees. That's a standard at the time. It was considered to be too gentle for a slab to release. It was held, unquestioned, for 60 years. Drone surveys in the last several years found something the original ground search never could. Sections directly above the camp running past 30 degrees, hidden under a layer of drifted snow that smoothed the whole thing out to the eye. 60 years of wind, frost, and erosion have worked that slope, but not a noticeable difference. And the drone data maps the ground we have now, with its irregular steps and hidden angles, still very much capable of what the models show. There's a mechanism behind that hidden angle, too. Wind coming off the shoulder above the camp kept dumping fresh snow onto a weaker layer underneath, slowly, somewhere between 7 and 13 hours after the tent went up. Nothing happening sudden, just a gradual buildup, hour after hour, while everyone inside was already asleep. Once buildup of snow hits its breaking point, a slab could let go fast, accelerating to somewhere between 30 and 50 miles an hour in just a few seconds. And this isn't some massive slide burying the whole slope. Models put it at roughly the size of a car. Still, that much snow moving that fast, that is enough force to crush a person's ribcage without even breaking the skin. The last 4 bodies that were found, crushed ribs, fractured skulls, no wounds visible from the outside. A 2025 review of documented avalanche deaths logs that same combination of injuries in similar cases. In January of 2022, 2 different mountain-guided trips went back to that exact slope on conditions close to what the group faced that night. And they caught on camera, on 2 different trips, 2 fresh slab releasing, same terrain, same kind of weather. The weather was bad enough that it nearly took the film crew. Katabatic winds are cold, heavy air that sinks and flows downhill under gravity, picking up speed as it goes. What can make them even stronger is the canyon effect. When the air hits a mountain shoulder or narrows between ridges, it gets channeled into a tighter space and moves faster. That channeling can easily push the wind from a strong breeze up to 45 to 67 miles per hour or more. On a slope, the air coming off the higher shoulder could get funneled right toward the camp area. It wouldn't be just faster, it would carry and dump snow as it goes, and as the pressure builds, the sound that comes with it is a constant, heavy roar, like thunder or a freight train passing. In whiteout conditions, it can make everything disorienting. This could have been what the hikers dealt with that night. Nitric acid fog, if a missile did misfire, would leave burns, skin, airway tissue, that kind of damage. The autopsies on the last 4 bodies record blunt force compression instead. No burns noted in any of the reports. Testing on the clothing, the same clothing that tested positive for radiation, found beta particles, not alpha particles. Beta particles are fast-moving electrons. They don't travel far and aren't very penetrating. But it was not alpha particles, which are heavier and more damaging. The source could have been thorium. It's a mildly radioactive metal that was added to gas lantern mantles back then to make them glow brighter and last longer. And the group's equipment list includes a thorium lantern mantle. It is important to note that one of the 9 hikers had also worked as cleanup after a nuclear accident 2 years earlier, back in 1957. That is the kind of thing that could easily leave lingering trace contamination on a person's gear. So the slope could have caused the slab to slide down on the campsite. The wind could have made a loud enough sound that the hikers thought the mountain was coming down around them. The injuries line up well with most of the theories, but how did it all actually happen that night? So here's the question. New numbers on that slope, injuries that line up, footage of it happening again 63 years later. Does that account for everything? Or is there still a piece that doesn't fit? Let me know what you think happened, down in the comments. There's a case from 1994 built the same way. A deflection off a boot, 0.4 of a second, and a version of events repeated exactly the same way for 30 years before anyone checked the angle of that touch against what actually happened after.